What if I told you that the Bible's definition of love might not be what you think it is? That the love your grandparents leaned on, the love your parents tried to show you, and the love you're still figuring out today are all connected by the same surprising thread woven through Scripture. Hidden in those ancient words is a story of love that stretches across generations. A love that doesn't fade with time, but actually deepens. And once you see it, you'll never look at your family, your relationships, or even your own life the same way again. Love is one of those words we all use. But if you ask 10 people what it really means, you'll probably get 10 different answers. Some will say it's about feelings, others about loyalty, others about sacrifice. The Bible talks about love in ways that go far deeper than emotions or even duty. It paints a picture of love that stretches from the beginning of time to the very end. A love that shows up in families, in friendships, in communities, and in the way God Himself reaches out to people. And here's the surprising part. The way Scripture talks about love actually changes from one generation to the next. What Abraham experienced with Isaac is not quite the same as what Paul wrote to the church in Corinth. The story of love unfolds slowly, like watching a child grow into an adult, revealing new layers along the way. That's what we're diving into today. We're going to look at how the Bible describes love across the ages, from the earliest days of covenant promises all the way to the radical teaching of Jesus and beyond. By the end of this video, you'll see that love isn't just a nice idea tucked into a few verses. It's the heartbeat of the entire story, a message designed to be handed down from one generation to the next. And whether you're a teenager, a parent, or a grandparent, you'll find yourself somewhere in this story. So stick around, because the love you thought you knew might have more to it than you ever imagined. When you open the first pages of the Bible, love doesn't show up as a soft or sentimental idea. It shows up in the form of covenant and loyalty. Love that is tested, love that is promised, love that is bound together with faith. Think about Abraham. God tells him to leave everything he knows, to walk into the unknown, and promises to make him the father of many nations. That promise is not just about Abraham, but about Isaac, Jacob, and every generation that follows. The love here is rooted in trust. Abraham loves God enough to step into uncertainty, and God's love for Abraham is shown in faithfulness to His word. It's not about romance or even kindness in the way we talk about it today. It's about building a foundation so solid that future generations could stand on it. Take the story of Abraham and Isaac on Mount Moriah. As shocking as that story feels, it's really about the kind of trust that love demands. Abraham's willingness to give up the son he waited his whole life for, and God's choice to spare Isaac, reveal something powerful. Love always involves sacrifice, but true love also protects. In a way, it's like the family traditions passed down through generations. Maybe your grandparents had to work through hardship so your parents could live better, and now you benefit from their sacrifices. You may not always see the connection, but their love is embedded in the choices they made long before you were born. The Bible's earliest chapters set this tone. Love is not just a passing emotion, but a covenant that links the past, present, and future. When God makes a promise, it's not only for one man or one woman, it's for their children and their children's children. That kind of generational love shapes the way people live, the way they raise families, and the way faith itself gets passed on. It's not flashy, but it's enduring. It's the type of love that doesn't just survive time, it thrives across it. As the story of Israel unfolds, love takes on a sharper, more defined shape in the laws and instructions God gives His people. In Deuteronomy, you see it crystal clear. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. That command isn't just a suggestion, it's a covenant bond. The Hebrew word often used here is hesed, which means steadfast love, mercy, or loyal kindness. It's not the kind of love that comes and goes with moods. It's the kind of love that clings, holds on, and refuses to let go, even when it hurts. This is the love of a parent who disciplines their child not out of anger, but out of commitment to their growth. It's love that sets boundaries so that future generations can thrive. The Israelites were constantly reminded to teach this love to their children. Talk about it when you sit at home, when you walk along the road, when you lie down, and when you get up. In other words, love wasn't supposed to be something you kept private or locked away in your heart. It was supposed to shape everyday life, to spill out in conversations, in habits, in family rhythms. If you think about it, this is exactly how love works in families today. The rules and values you grew up with, the things your parents told you again and again, were their way of trying to pass down love, even if it didn't always feel like love at the time. But here's the challenge. The people didn't always get it right. They broke the covenant, wandered off, and forgot who they were. And yet, God's hesed didn't vanish. His love stayed steady, even when theirs wavered. That's one of the most surprising truths in these early books. Love doesn't depend on perfect behavior. It depends on commitment. Just like a mother who still loves her child after a bad decision, God's covenant love refused to let go. It's a picture of love that goes beyond feelings, teaching every generation that true love stands firm, no matter what storms come. If the law gives us the framework of love, the Psalms and Proverbs give us the heartbeat. The Psalms are filled with words that describe God's love as everlasting, unfailing, and a safe refuge. Give thanks to the Lord, for He is good. His love endures forever. That phrase echoes like a chorus throughout the Psalms, almost as if each generation needed to be reminded that no matter what happens, God's love does not expire. When David writes about God's love, he describes it as a shield, a song in the night, a rock that cannot be moved. These are not abstract ideas. They're survival language. They are the words of someone who knows what it means to cling to love when everything else is falling apart. Proverbs takes a different approach. Instead of poetic songs, it offers practical wisdom. At first glance, Proverbs might seem like a book of advice, but at its core, it's an expression of love passed from parent to child. My son, do not forget my teaching, but keep my commands in your heart. It's the voice of a father who knows that wisdom will keep his children safe in a dangerous world. Love here looks like instruction, like guidance, like pointing someone away from the path of destruction and toward the way of life. If you've ever had an older family member tell you something that annoyed you at the time, but later made sense, you know what this kind of love feels like. It doesn't always sound soft or sweet, but it's rooted in care that stretches across years. The Psalms and Proverbs together show two sides of the same coin. God's love is both shelter and guidance. It's the warm embrace of protection and the firm hand that keeps you steady. One generation sings about God's love as a refuge. Another passes down wisdom as a safeguard, and both are acts of love. What's striking is how relevant this still feels. We crave security in uncertain times, and we crave direction when we feel lost. The ancient words still speak into both needs, reminding us that love is not just about how we feel, but also about how we live. This is love in action. Love that crosses the gap from one life stage to the next, from one generation to another. When you move into the writings of the prophets, love is no longer just about covenant promises or wise instruction. It becomes a story of heartbreak and relentless pursuit. The prophets often described God's relationship with Israel like that of a husband and wife, where one remains faithful and the other strays. Hosea is the clearest example. God tells Hosea to marry Gomer, a woman who would betray him, as a living picture of Israel's unfaithfulness. Yet even in betrayal, God's love shines through. He tells Israel, "I will heal their waywardness and love them freely." That's not love that waits for the other person to get it right. It's love that moves first, love that forgives, love that refuses to give up. The prophets also carry a vision of renewal. They speak of God's love as the force that will restore what has been broken, heal wounds that have lasted generations, and bring people back to Him. Jeremiah describes God's love as everlasting, the kind of love that can rebuild even after exile and devastation. Isaiah points forward to a servant who will bear the pain of the people, showing love not just for one generation but for all to come. It's as if the prophets are standing on the edge of history, calling out that love is not finished yet, that there's something bigger on the horizon. And when you think about it, this is the same kind of love we see in families today. Parents love their children, even when they wander far from what they've been taught. Grandparents keep the door open, waiting for reconciliation. Love doesn't erase pain, but it holds out hope for restoration. The prophets remind us that love isn't naive. It sees the reality of betrayal and disappointment, but it also refuses to stop hoping, to stop believing that the story can change. This vision of love reaches forward, pointing us towards something greater that will one day arrive in full. It sets the stage for the next chapter in the story. A love that will step into the world in the most unexpected way. As the Old Testament closes, the stage is set for something new. The picture of love has been building layer upon layer. Covenant faithfulness, parental guidance, passionate pursuit. But there's still a sense of longing. The people are waiting for a love that can finally heal the gap between God and humanity once and for all. That's where the New Testament steps in. Suddenly, love isn't just a promise or a prophecy, it's a person. The story moves from laws written on stone tablets to love written on human hearts through Jesus Christ. This shift is enormous. Up until now, God's love was often shown through actions, words, or symbols, but in the New Testament it becomes flesh and blood. It walks, talks, eats meals, and touches the untouchable. John writes, "The Word became flesh and made His dwelling among us." Love is no longer distant or abstract. It's close enough to sit across the table from you. Imagine the surprise of people who had been waiting for a mighty warrior king, but instead encountered a carpenter's son who healed the sick and spoke about love as the greatest commandment. This was not the love they expected, but it was the love they needed. It's also the love that ties every generation together. The commandments to love God and love neighbor are not bound to one culture, one century, or one way of life. They are universal truths that outlast trends, traditions, and even time itself. The transition from the Old Testament to the New shows us that love is not static. It grows, it deepens, it finds new ways to reach people where they are. And as we turn the page, we see how Jesus takes this story of love and gives it a depth that no one could have imagined before. When Jesus begins to teach, His words about love cut through centuries of tradition and expectation. Instead of piling on more rules, He distills everything down to 2 commands. Love God with everything you are, and love your neighbor as yourself. It sounds simple, but it's the kind of simplicity that turns the world upside down. In a culture that often defined love within the boundaries of family, tribe, or nation, Jesus blew the doors wide open. He even took it further. Love your enemies. That's not the kind of advice anyone was looking for. It's the kind of teaching that makes you stop and ask, is that even possible? But Jesus didn't just talk about love, he showed it. Think of the stories he told. The Good Samaritan, where a man from a despised group becomes the example of compassion. The Prodigal Son, where a father runs out to embrace the child who betrayed him. These parables are snapshots of love that transcends generations. The father in the Prodigal Son story isn't just patient. He's relentless in his hope, waiting every day for his child to come home. That's the kind of love that grandparents, parents, and children can all recognize, because it mirrors the longing we feel for reconciliation in our own families. And then, there are his actions. Jesus touched lepers when no one else would. He spoke with women that society ignored. He invited children into the center when others tried to push them away. Each act was a statement. Love doesn't exclude, it doesn't divide, it doesn't calculate who deserves it. A love, in Jesus' words and deeds, was radical, boundary-breaking, and deeply human. If you think about it, that's why his message still resonates today. Every generation struggles with who deserves love and how far we should go. Jesus' answer never changes, as far as it takes. His teaching redefines love, not as something that depends on feelings or social rules, but as something that comes straight from the heart of God and reaches across every barrier we put up. It was shocking then, and if we're honest, it's still shocking now. All of Jesus' words about love build up to one moment, the cross. If his teachings showed us what love looks like in everyday life, his death showed us the ultimate picture of love in action. John 15:13 says, "Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends." And that's exactly what he did. Except he didn't just die for his friends. He died for everyone, even those who mocked him, betrayed him, and nailed him to the wood. The cross is not just a tragic ending. It's the climax of the entire story of love stretching from Genesis to Revelation. It's where covenant love, sacrificial love, forgiving love, and eternal love all meet. Think about it. For generations, people had offered sacrifices to try and stay right with God, but every sacrifice was temporary. The love shown at the cross was different. Jesus gave himself once and for all, a love so deep that it reached backward to cover the failures of past generations and forward to embrace people not even born yet. That includes us today. The cross is the moment where love stopped being just a word and became a world-changing reality. What makes it even more powerful is that this love was not forced. Jesus wasn't a victim trapped in a situation he couldn't control. He chose the cross. He said, "No one takes my life from me. I lay it down of my own accord." That means his love wasn't passive. It was intentional. It was the kind of love that sees the worst of humanity and still says, "You are worth it." This is why John 3:16 has been repeated for generations. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son. It's simple, it's profound, and it's personal. And here's the astonishing part. This act of love doesn't lose its power with time. The same cross that spoke to people 2,000 years ago still speaks to us today. Parents, grandparents, children, the elderly, the young, it doesn't matter. The cross cuts across time, culture, and background. It's not locked to one moment in history. It's a message that keeps echoing, telling every generation the same thing. You are loved more than you can ever imagine. After the cross and resurrection, the task of explaining and living out this kind of love fell heavily on the early church, and no one articulated it more clearly than Paul. His letters are filled with instructions about love, not the shallow kind, but the deep, active kind that builds communities and holds them together. In 1 Corinthians 13, Paul describes love in a way that still gets read at weddings today. Love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud. But he wasn't just writing about romance. He was teaching a church divided by arguments, status, and pride, what it meant to live in God's love day by day. Love, for Paul, was not about what you say or how spiritual you seem. It was about what you do. If you can speak in tongues, move mountains with faith, or even give away everything you own but don't have love, he says, you gain nothing. Paul also makes love practical. In his letters to families, he calls parents not to exasperate their children, but to raise them with gentleness and care. He tells husbands and wives to love each other with respect and sacrifice. He encourages churches to bear one another's burdens, forgive quickly, and treat others as more important than themselves. What's striking is that Paul constantly points back to Jesus as the model. Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. That's not sentimental. It's costly, everyday, sacrificial love. In the early Christian communities, this way of love broke barriers that had stood for generations. Jews and Gentiles, slaves and free, men and women, old and young, all were called to sit at the same table, to worship the same Lord, and to treat each other as family. It was revolutionary. Roman society was built on hierarchy, but the church was built on love. That's why so many were drawn to it. Outsiders looked at these small groups of believers and said, "See how they love one another." It was the kind of love that couldn't be ignored. The kind that wasn't just preached, but lived. Paul's vision shows us that love is not limited by age, background, or social position. It stretches across every barrier and unites people who would otherwise have nothing in common. That's the kind of love that not only survives across generations, but reshapes them. It's love as the very foundation of a new kind of community, one that still speaks to us today. One of the clearest pictures of love, passing from one generation to the next, comes from the story of Timothy. Paul writes to him and points out that his sincere faith first lived in his grandmother Lois and in his mother Eunice before it lived in him. That detail is easy to overlook, but it's powerful. Faith didn't appear out of nowhere in Timothy's life. It was nurtured, taught, and modeled by the women in his family who loved him enough to guide him toward God. Their love became the soil in which his faith grew, and through that, Timothy went on to lead others. This shows us something vital. Love is not just experienced in the moment, it's handed down like an inheritance. We often think about inheritance in terms of money or property, but the Bible reminds us that the most valuable thing you can pass on is love rooted in faith. Parents who pray with their children, grandparents who share stories of God's faithfulness, even small acts of kindness repeated year after year. All of these become building blocks for the next generation. It's less about lectures and more about living examples. Children remember what they see more than what they hear. They carry forward habits, traditions, and values long after the words have faded. This generational transmission isn't always easy. Sometimes the love handed down is broken or imperfect. Families may struggle with cycles of hurt or distance. But even there, God's love has a way of breaking through, restoring what was lost, and starting something new. The story of Lois, Eunice, and Timothy shows us that one generation's love can ripple forward in ways far greater than they ever imagined. It's a reminder that love is not just for now. It's an investment in the future, a legacy that shapes lives long after we're gone. But love across generations doesn't always flow smoothly. Each generation tends to see love differently, and that creates tension. In the Bible, you see this struggle play out in families. Jacob showed favoritism toward Joseph, which drove a wedge between him and his brothers. David's family was torn apart by rivalry and betrayal, even though he was a man after God's own heart. These stories remind us that love, when filtered through human weakness, can get tangled up with pride, jealousy, and misunderstanding. It's not always neat or easy. The same thing happens today. Older generations might express love through hard work and providing, while younger ones might long for emotional connection and affirmation. Parents sometimes think discipline is the highest form of care, while children may interpret it as distance or rejection. Grandparents might emphasize tradition, while their grandchildren crave new ways of expressing faith and love. None of these perspectives are wrong, but when they collide, the result is conflict. The challenge is that love feels different, depending on which side of the generational line you're standing on. This gap can leave people feeling unloved, even when love is present. A father who works long hours may think he's showing love by providing, but his child may feel neglected. A grandmother may repeat old stories out of love, but her grandchildren might roll their eyes instead of listening. Misunderstandings pile up, and soon everyone wonders if love has gone missing. The Bible's honesty about family struggles shows us we're not alone in this. Generational love has always been complicated, but it's also always been worth fighting for. The question is, how do we bridge the gap? How do we learn to recognize love in forms we don't always understand? The Bible points us toward reconciliation as the way to bridge these gaps. At the heart of reconciliation is humility, choosing to listen, choosing to forgive, and choosing to value relationships over being right. The story of the prodigal son is the perfect picture of this. A young man takes his inheritance, wastes it all, and returns home expecting rejection. Instead, his father runs to meet him, wraps him in an embrace, and restores him as a son. That moment isn't just about forgiveness. It's about breaking the cycle of misunderstanding between generations. The father didn't lecture or shame him. He showed love in a way the son could finally understand, and in doing so, he healed the gap. Reconciliation also requires patience. Paul reminds believers to bear with one another in love. That means love doesn't give up when it's difficult. Parents may need to step into the world of their children to understand their struggles. Children may need to recognize the sacrifices their parents or grandparents made, even if they were expressed differently. Both sides must choose empathy, the willingness to see through the other's eyes. That's not easy, but it's the soil where real love grows. Bridging generational divides also means valuing the strengths each generation brings. The wisdom of elders, the energy of youth, the resilience of parents, all are needed for a complete picture of love. Proverbs says, "Gray hair is a crown of splendor," honoring the experience of the old. While Paul tells Timothy, "Don't let anyone look down on you because you are young," affirming the value of the young. Love doesn't erase differences. It weaves them together into something stronger. In our families and communities, reconciliation often looks like small acts. Listening without interrupting, saying, "I'm sorry," or reaching out when pride would rather stay silent. These acts echo the biblical truth that love isn't just a feeling. It's a choice, repeated day after day, until it shapes the relationship. When we practice that kind of love, the distance between generations doesn't disappear, but it becomes a bridge instead of a barrier. When you step back and look at the whole story, the Bible's message about love is far more surprising than most people expect. It isn't one size fits all. It shifts and deepens across the generations, meeting people in the realities of their time. With Abraham, love was trust and covenant. With Moses and the law, it was steadfast loyalty and discipline. In the Psalms and Proverbs, it became refuge and wisdom. Through the prophets, it was passionate pursuit and restoration. In Jesus, it became radical inclusion and ultimate sacrifice. And in the early church, it became the foundation of a new kind of community that broke down barriers of age, culture, and status. Different expressions, but the same heartbeat. The climax of this story is that love is not locked to one moment or one way of life. It adapts without losing its core. Every generation needs love, but each one experiences it in unique ways. Some see it in tradition, some in sacrifice, some in forgiveness, some in guidance. Yet the thread running through all of it is God's unchanging love, steady and faithful, binding families, communities, and centuries together. That's the surprise. Love is bigger than personal feelings or cultural trends. It is the one force that endures, outlasts, and transcends time. And here's what that means for us. No matter where you find yourself, whether you're young and searching, middle-aged and burdened, or old and remembering, this love speaks to you. You don't have to belong to a certain generation to receive it. You don't have to match someone else's definition of it to understand it. You are part of the story. The same love that carried Abraham, sustained David, called back Israel, redefined life through Jesus, and united the early church, is the same love reaching for you now. That's not just history, that's reality. It's a truth that can change how you see your family, your relationships, and yourself. So how do we take this truth and live it out today? It starts with simple, intentional choices. Pray for the people in your family, even when it feels routine or awkward. Speak words of encouragement, even when the atmosphere is tense. Listen to the stories of older generations and honor their wisdom, even if you don't fully understand it. Find ways to share what you've learned with younger people, knowing that your actions will echo long after you're gone. Small acts, kindness, patience, forgiveness, stack up over time into a legacy of love that shapes generations. Another key step is to let God's love flow through you first. When you experience love that is patient, forgiving, and sacrificial, it becomes easier to pass it on. We can't give what we don't possess. That's why personal time in prayer, reflection, and scripture isn't just a spiritual exercise. It's the way we refill ourselves so we can love others well. The Bible calls it being rooted and established in love. Once rooted, your life becomes a channel through which love reaches people you may never even meet. Finally, remember that generational love is never perfect, and that's okay. It's not about flawless behavior. It's about faithfulness. Even when mistakes happen, even when words are misunderstood, even when relationships feel broken, love has the power to heal, restore, and connect. Each generation builds on the one before, learning from its successes and failures, and in that process, God's love continues to move forward. The surprising truth of the Bible is that love is bigger than our mistakes, bigger than time, and bigger than any gap we might feel between us and the next generation. It keeps moving, and it keeps growing. The takeaway is clear. Love is the thread that ties generations together, and it's meant to be lived, not just talked about. Every action, every word, every moment of patience and forgiveness contributes to a legacy that can outlast us. The Bible doesn't just tell us to love. It shows us how love moves through families, communities, and time itself. It teaches that love isn't static. It's active, sacrificial, and adaptable, able to bridge gaps, heal wounds, and inspire faith in those who come after us. When we embrace this, we begin to see our own lives differently. The way we treat our parents, children, siblings, and even strangers becomes part of a bigger story. We realize that love is never wasted, even in small gestures. And the beauty is that every generation has the chance to both receive and pass on this love, creating a chain that echoes through time. The Bible's surprising words on love aren't just ancient advice. They are a living guide, calling us to participate in a cycle of love that can transform families and communities across generations. This is the kind of love that doesn't fade, that leaves a mark long after we're gone, and that shows the world the power of God's heart in action.